There are a lot of sorceries in Elden Ring, 70 of them, I counted, but you only have 10 memory slots to work with at once. And I'll be honest, if you asked me which one is the best sorcery, well, it'd be hard not to say everyone! Because honestly, they're all really fun, they're all unique, they all have a lot going for them, and they're all powerful enough to get by with, right, if you take a liking to any in particular. But today's not about the fact that I love all my sorcery children equally, it's about time deciding which one's the favourite and having all of the others grow up knowing that they're not quite as loved.
Or something like that, I don't know, my childhood was incredible.
Anyway, today then, ladies and gentlemen tarnished, I am going to bring you the ultimate true sorcery tier list. And how this is going to work is obviously not, all 70 of them, but the very best 14 or so ranked and competing against each other. So everything that's going to be here, is the best of the best, but we're going to find out what the best of the best of the best is, especially with the recent 1.06 big update completely kind of murdering one of the previously best sorceries. And in fact, before we get to the tier list, we should probably sort that elephant out. Stars of Ruin, Stars of Ruined. Yes, indeed. It used to be just kind of fine as far as enemies in PvE and bosses went, but PvP is obviously where it shined. It was oppressive, nearly impossible to dodge, and it just kind of killed people by mindlessly spamming. Now you can avoid it by just walking in a circle, and it's not really a threat, so while it's still fine, it's no longer really worthy of being considered one of the best sorceries. So with that in mind, let's begin then with a solid A tier entry in Comet Azur. And look, how could this not appear here and not appear high? Yes, in PvP, it is obviously a joke, a non-usable sorcery, might as well not exist. Yes, against really fast, agile enemies, again, it's not great. But when you have the original melting infinite FP laser beam of doom one-shotting bosses that was so magnificent so early on and still outperforms everything in terms of just pure pinpoint destruction, I mean, it's gotta be here, does it not? It really is kind of the king of PvE sorceries, at least arguably. Next up then, let's get our first S tier, and it's Adula's Moonblade. An absolutely ridiculous sorcery in both PvP and PvE, massive damage, massive frost application, and while you can no longer double hit with it, that doesn't really matter. It's got fantastic range, fantastic utility, and is just all around incredible in every single situation, in every single way. There really is no downsides to using it, it's just incredibly potent and incredibly good at what it does, and honestly, if you could only have a single sorcery equipped, and that's it, only one in your memory slots, Adula's Moonblade is one of only two, which might be a hint for the future, that I would consider. Next up then, we have Ranni's Dark Moon joining A tier. Yes, this one, again in PvP, isn't actually the worst, especially in invasions where you're sneaking up on someone, the tracking is quite good, the speed is quite good, and it will one-shot them. It's not going to happen often, but, it's not completely unusable, but against bosses, it's just impeccable. Actually being able to slam for that much damage, and then weaken their resistance so all of your spells now do more damage, I mean, that speaks for itself. That is irreplaceable, and it makes this an absolutely must-have solid bit of your repertoire for any budding sorcerer. After that, we have Loretta's Greatbow in C, which, yes, might be a bit Loretta's Great Low of a tier for it, but that's simply because it's very unwieldy a lot of the time, and that's the main issue that there is with this. But when it's good, it is very good. It is better than Mastery. The range is obviously massive, the damage is fantastic, and it offers you a really good distance option for both unsuspecting players and for a lot of situations in PvE where the level is built to allow it. So yeah, very, very much a solid choice. Then we have, honestly, one of my favourite sorceries in the game. From Deformed Selen, which I think that is their official title now, it is Shard Spiral. This is amazing. It might as well just be the drill. It bores through enemies, through bosses, and if they're at all not too speedy, it will absolutely shred them. And I think this might be probably the most underestimated sorcery for how powerful it is in the entire game. It also looks fantastic, but it's just so good seeing that beam slowly churn round as the health bar disintegrates for such a fast cast and for such little FP. It really is a gem. Then we're going to a wild card pick just to make things interesting. This is by far the worst of the sorceries I'm talking about today, and maybe doesn't even deserve to be here, but the thing is I absolutely love it, and in the right circumstances, it is ludicrous. It is Rykard's Rancor.
Join myself and King as family.
And it is a Magma sorcery, and it absolutely blows things the fuck up. And that is ultimately satisfying. Its damage is ludicrous, the tracking is great, just the sheer number of damage explosions that go off is fantastic, and it is fun to actually build with, you know, fire damage in mind from your sorcery. And most importantly of all, I really think it is just one of the more purely fun ones that exists. And while it's not the best in PvP, it is amusing watching people run around in Terra as the ghost of explosive death chases them down. Then we have Carian Piercer piercing into B. There's not much to say about this one. It is good damage, it is good range, it is a good mix-up in PvP, it just gives you a lot of utility. It has massive stagger damage in PvE, it's just an all-round incredibly useful tool to have in your arsenal that serves a lot of purposes, isn't particularly crazy, but it's just very good at what it does. Then in C tier, Meteorite of Astel, one of the other big hold it forever infinite FP goes crazy channeling sorceries, and I think anything that can kill big bosses, or indeed little bosses too, in one cast at least deserves a mention in a tier list like this. Also, as a special note, it deals roughly half physical damage, which means you can buff it with stuff like Blood Boil Aromatic, which you cannot do with, of course, most sorceries. That gives it a little bit of an edge, and that applies to all of the gravity sorceries too, so that's really, really nice. Or at least Rock Sling. Oh! Rock Sling! How did that happen? Hey! Over there at B tier! The best early game sorcery that there is, so definitely worth a mention just for that alone, but also remains incredibly effective throughout the entire game. You end up in a situation where you have this massively long range, heftily damaging tool that is both great in PvP with really good tracking, applies a lot of good pressure, and, or at least in invasions. Duels not so much, but still, and then it's really good for level clearing in essentially nearly every setup you could imagine when it comes to the PvE side of things. So just a real gem. After that then, we have Carian Phalanx. Yes, indeed. This is the best of the hold thing above your head sorceries, and it's a really useful tool. It does a good amount of damage in PvE, that's fine, but it's not really why it's here. In PvP is where it shines. It's a fantastic spacing tool that gives you a bit of breathing room as people approach you a little bit more cautiously, and just lets you do some really fun, absurd combos.
Oh, no, wait for me to get close. Reaction time. And target.
Oh!
I think we've stumbled onto something here.
Then we have Night Comet coming in at C. This is the most damage per FP you can do with sorceries, as long as you are holding a Staff of Loss in your other hand, and for that reason it gets a spot here. It also gets a spot here because, hey, it's an invisible sorcery, which comes with a fantastic amount of utility, as that means enemies won't try and dodge it, which is really good. It's not especially better than any other given blast of glintstone energy in PvP, but it really does shine as your bread and butter just kill bosses generally in PvE. Then we have the other blast of glintstone on this in A, Glintstone Shard. The speed on this is what gets it here. It is so fast. You can cast it while sprinting for an even faster one. It's just a massive amount of utility that is especially useful to have, and is honestly one of your best bread and butter abilities that you can get your hands on. It's just good in the truest of senses. As is Terra Magica, which also joins it in A, because, well, how could it not? This is a massive damage amp to all of your magic damage, not just sorceries, but magic Ashes of War, even magic damage dealing items, and it is one of the key combo pieces in all of the absurd, ridiculous stuff that sorceries can do. Even in duels and invasions, if you have got this down, you're suddenly very dangerous to approach, because if they try and fight you and you just give them a quick little Carian slice, well, that is going to hit like an absolute truck at warp speed, and they're going to crumble. If they stay far away, you're just going to bomb them for massively damaging sorceries until eventually you manage to land one against them. It really makes enemies have to think, and then in PvE, it just lets you do ridiculous stuff, and that's always fun. Finally then, our final entry in our final S tier is, as I just mentioned it real quick, Carian Slicer. This is arguably the best sorcery in the game. Obviously, arguably, because Adula's Moonblade is up in S tier as well, but ultimately, it is just ridiculous how good this is. It comes out incredibly quickly. You can chain it into other sorceries. It does unbelievably massive damage for how cheap and easy it is to use. It's so hard to deal with in PvP, especially in duels, because it will do more damage than most weapons, and it will swing much faster than most weapons. You can do it while sprinting, and essentially it just is a universal tool of death dealing that every sorcerer should be familiar with, especially with the Glintstone staff that boosts it. In your other hand, it just makes it even that more oppressive. It is the definition of simple and effective, and it shines in that role. And really, Carian Slicer for melee, Glintstone Shard at ranged, and you are laughing all the way to the Sorcerer's Bank. Alright then, guys. God, I love Sorcery and Elden Ring, and I could talk about them all for essentially forever. I hope this then was a fun little look at how the best of the best rank against each other, and just, you know, fun talking about sorceries in general. For now then, like if you have enjoyed this, subscribe and hit the bell for more. Consider supporting the future of the channel on Patreon down below. And until we meet again, goodbye.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world our stage. Goodbye.